Hi, I'm Rory Greener from XR Today, and we're going to be exploring the role of AI in the XR industry in today's discussion. It's a deep subject, and to shed some light on this topic is the head of virtual reality at Lenovo, Jason McGuigan. Thank you so much for joining me today. We've got a lot of subjects to talk about. It's a very deep subject in its own right. So I think the best place to start is really just at the top, and we can break it down a little bit. So from your perspective, Jason, with the parallel journey that these technologies have taken, how is Gen AI going to affect the XR industry?
Yeah, it's a topic that's on top of everybody's mind right now. Obviously, generative AI is everywhere. We're seeing this as one of those things that people are saying, "All right, well, did XR get supplanted by generative AI?" As like the big topic of the day, and we really see them as companionable technologies, and really one folding very directly into the other. At its heart, XR is about wearable devices, devices you put on your head and then engage in simulations or engage in enhancements to your real world. So by utilizing generative AI and being able to have that in a wearable device, you essentially have the most readily available tool with some of the biggest, broadest capabilities we've ever seen in humanity's history, essentially at your fingertips. And we're seeing this across the board. From just the simple glasses you might wear that have AI built into them by a speaker, or as more complex devices like XR, AR and VR headsets. Where we're seeing in particular the utility of this is in a couple of areas. One is around the dynamic nature of content that can be created with it, as well as the efficiencies created by utilizing these tools in the production workflow, from a designer perspective, from a programming perspective, and everything in between. And we are truly nearing the day where a new developer, someone that may have never developed anything for XR before, can interact with an AI and can create an experience by using verbal prompts. The same way we interact with a ChatGPT today, or a Midjourney, or any of the other tools we might use on a daily basis that 2 years ago, 3 years ago weren't even possible. We're nearing the days where we're going to be able to speak programs into existence, speak worlds into existence, and essentially take somebody that's brand new to the field and get them up, running, and into XR from a development perspective with just a few verbal prompts.
So you're speaking a lot from the developer point of view there and a technology point of view. Why is it important for our readers, for brands, businesses, builders themselves, and many more sectors covered? Why is it important for them to understand this impact of Gen AI and XR together? And perhaps why is it important for them to know this to get ahead of the pack?
Absolutely. And we're seeing this question come up both from the development perspective as well as the customer perspective. And there's sometimes very different stories you want to tell there. The developer perspective, they may feel like it's impacting their roles and responsibilities. And from an enterprise perspective, you're looking at what you actually can create with it. So from my background in development and in creative fields, for many years I worked with enterprise customers on traditional media. And every bit of media that we created for those enterprise customers were focused on a specific singular goal, and they had specific terms associated with that. We want to make a piece of content for this launch of this product. Now, when you're looking at that from a time to market perspective and a cost perspective, usually you weigh that out, not based on the creativity or what you could inject into it, but it was time and materials. How many people worked on that? How many hours they had to work on to create it? And that's what you would use to create your proposal for those customers. And when we look at it from that perspective, the amount of content that can be derived, the faster time to market, and the tools that expedite the developers in that process can mean that they could either generate more personalized content, a larger volume of content, or more creative content based on a smaller team. So there is a level of, what do you do with all those developers that may have previously been working on it if they're now being assisted by these tools? And all of that work that they previously were doing now can be done by more singular individuals. And there's two ways of looking at it. One is essentially the supercharging of the individuals and the ability to inject more creativity, more life, more energy into what you're creating. And that's an area I'm very passionate about, because as developers come to terms with these new tools, it's very similar to what we saw when linear editing went to nonlinear editing. There used to be the idea that you had to do everything very manually, and then when you had the ability to use disposable and non-destructible formats for film editing, a lot of the editors that were thinking, oh, well, this is going to take up all my time, they realized, no, it just makes them a better editor. It gives them more freedom and flexibility to explore, to inject more creativity, to inject more life into what they're creating. So I think that the tools that we have in front of us are absolutely doing that for developers across the board, especially in the interactive realm.
Fantastic. And it'd be great to explore the tools of today and tomorrow. But just before we get onto that topic, it'd be good to learn and good to get a little bit of a breakdown into what that return on investment looks like. You're speaking about these use cases, these ideas, perhaps in training or training or development, collaboration, etc. How is XR or AI enhanced XR tools perhaps creating a new return on investment compared to traditional methods?
So yeah, one of the ways that we see XR being used today, of course, learning and development, training, safety training, things of that nature. For any organization, it requires specific bespoke development for that organization. And when you're creating it for that organization, it requires developers and designers to be fully invested in creating that one singular goal, that one singular path. So you're creating training for a new specific product for a customer. You've got designers, developers, audio engineers. You've got potentially voice talent. You've got all these people that are interacting with it. There could be dozens of people getting their hands into that. Now, if you can do that for not just one product, but for 10 products in that same period of time, because of the tools that you have at your disposal, you can provide more value to the end customer. Why is that so important to a new field like XR, though, is really the key. Because XR content as a whole is very difficult to create. And there's a small number of people that are really good at making it, but it's not quite as open and available. So this democratizes some of the tools. It expedites the powers of those individuals that do have it. And it makes it so more people can get involved in that creative process, which means that there will be more specialized content in the XR field, which will create more adoption of the technology. So it is this cycle that we see. It's generating that cycle to move faster, because now that organization says, well, we've got one piece of great content, but we can't afford to do any more. Now they say, well, we have a whole library of content, and it actually hits all of our needs, and we're able to create it for less time, less cost, and be able to really train our people up and running more quickly. And you look at the basic calculation of what ROI is, right? It's return on investment. You either have to have a greater return or lower investment. And in this case, you're getting, to a degree, both. You're lowering your overall investment costs, but you're getting a greater return because you have either better content or a broader cross-section of content available to your people.
Fantastic. And let's touch on those tools. And there's two subsections here, really, today's tools and tomorrow's tools, as I mentioned. It'd be great to get a little bit of an insight into the AI tools that exist today to help these brands and businesses leverage XR before we touch on stuff that might emerge in the next 5 years.
Sure. It's one of those things where like next 5 years is very blue sky, right? It's like the next 5 minutes we have to worry about, like what's going to get announced later today that will make what we're talking about now feel like it was ancient history. And we see that happening so quick in this industry right now. And it's amazingly fun to be engaged in this because, what you previously thought would be impossible or well down the road, is in front of us already. I recently, did a video that I think you had seen. That video highlighted things that were in my mind like, oh, this is coming within the next year or two. And then sure enough, 2 weeks later, some of those technologies were already being announced. And, it's the cycle moves so quick. So the things that we're seeing today, very basic tools that we, again, wouldn't have had 2 years ago that we see as almost commonplace now, things like ChatGPT. So ChatGPT can be utilized in a variety of ways, from pre-production, when you're generating and ideating things for a customer. Here's our goal, our prospectus. Here's what our previous training is, or here's the web page that says, this is what the product is. Give me a training program on how to teach somebody how to do that in 5 succinct lessons. Giving you a framework for that. Very, very simple example of how that could be used expeditiously for a project developer that's going into it and just starting things off. But then when you start jumping into how you actually create the content. So as an XR developer, one of the major aspects is, of course, programming. ChatGPT and other LLMs can do a great job of checking your code, or can give you ways of taking a code base that maybe you're familiar with and then translating it to another code base. So these LLMs just aren't about the spoken language, but they're about computer languages as well. And they're trained very, very well in those, and they're just getting better and better every day. Now, will they meet the expertise of a developer or designer or any of those other folks? Not quite yet, but Will they be an amazing assistant for efficiencies? Absolutely. So again, creating a faster time to market and making those people that much more powerful with their abilities. And then we get into more of the creative aspects. There's a big area around this, around voice talent and voice acting, even video assets, things that you might be employing into your production. Those things can be generated on the fly via voice prompts, and sometimes that will be a cost savings for the customer. Or even if you already have voice talent that you're utilizing or video assets that you're utilizing, when you have to make a change, rather than having to go back and bring those people back in or do a re-record for a simple verbal flub, all of those things that used to cost a lot of time and money to swap out can now be done almost instantaneously. And then we start looking at the real creative, hardcore creative tools where you can generate 3D meshes on the fly, 3D models on the fly, 3D backdrops on the fly. And we're already seeing major development applications like Unity integrate AI tools directly into their applications. So Unity announced Muse. Muse is essentially allowing you to generate some of your content through generative AI while you're actually working with inside of Unity. So it's combining these tools into a singular entity. And then you look at even something that's even more open and available, Roblox. If you're familiar with Roblox, they have the ability for people to go in and create their own content within that, and they have their own programming language. And you could speak into existence objects. You can change the color of objects. You could even give it the definition of a code without actually writing any code yourself. You can say, I have a car here. When I press the Y button on this controller, I want this car to move forward. You could speak that, and you'll see the code populate. And it'll actually show you how it's actually being done and implement that code for you without you having to do anything. So again, it's breaking down the barriers for people that can get involved in these processes. And maybe you can have early stage prototypers getting in before your hardcore developers or designers. And the roughing out, the prototyping, all that saves a lot of time, energy, get customer approvals, go back to your finishing passes, and make your whole production pipeline much tighter and much more efficient. So that's just a few areas. Down the road, we're talking about a deep combination of these tools, and we're already seeing this today. So, for example, you remember when ChatGPT came out, was it November of 2022, I think it was? So yeah, we're gonna hit the 2-year anniversary later this month. And it feels like we've been living with ChatGPT our entire lives at this point, right? Like it just feels entirely ubiquitous. But you look at the tools that it had available at its disposal on day one, and you can give it some information, you can get some information back, and people were saying, oh, this is kind of like Google, maybe a little bit different. And then people start to peel the onion and say, oh, well, I could actually start interacting it more like I interact with a person. And then they implemented the ability for it to generate images, and now you can talk to it. I mean, there's not a single day that goes by right now for me already that I don't pick up my phone, start a conversation with ChatGPT, and have a dynamic back and forth voice conversation that will help me organize my thoughts, take notes, and makes me much more efficient at my job, even if I'm not even touching the development process. So we're going to see this combination of tools getting more and more tightly integrated with things we're familiar with, which is what Microsoft is, of course, doing with Copilot and all the tools we use on a daily basis. But then we'll see that going to our Adobe software, the Autodesk software. Every piece of the chain that you might be used to developing with is going to have these tools deeply integrated with it. So you're going to be able to act and react and adjust in more natural ways.
Could you perhaps share some thoughts on the state of the metaverse, perhaps in 2024 leading into 25, and what potential does that technology really hold for businesses beyond the perceived hype?
Yeah, well, it's funny. The metaverse was always kind of an odd term, and it still has its place in kind of setting a stage, right? It's not a singular destination, but it's kind of like the internet, right? The internet is an amalgamation of like all these different websites. You could jump from one to the other. You could do it as easy as changing channels now, and each one has its own place within your world, but you access all of it through a web browser on a computer or on a phone. And I think that's really where the metaverse will become, is a deeper enhanced aspect of what the internet is today, but in a much more spatial fashion. And what I mean by that is that when we have devices that are ready to wear and easily accessible to us every day, being able to do our online shopping in a spatial fashion, to be able to essentially interact with the news in different ways, to be able to be present in spaces. You want to watch the highlights of last night's game by sitting courtside. you'll be able to do that because they captured it with a regular camera, and AI will be able to fill in all those gaps. And that's really what we're seeing these tools be capable of, is that the content and the idea behind a metaverse that we started talking about years ago was a fully realized world we could interact with all the objects around us and treat it as almost a digital parallel. And that was kind of the hyped up version of it. And I think we quickly realized that's just not feasible from any perspective. And it's not necessary, and it's not what people really want. But when we start looking at what is actually useful to us and being able to interact with the spatial world, all of that requires a very heavy lift from, again, those small number of teams and developers that can create that content. Now, when you remove the barrier of the creation of content, and it could be semi-automated and eventually very, very automated, where the second you engage with an article, it can generate, starting with an image to a 3D object, a 3D object to a 3D space into a virtual space, all of those things happening on the back end before you pop your glasses on, or if you're already wearing them, start engagement and then have it relayed directly into implementing some of those objects in your space. All of it can be done on the fly through generative AI. So the idea of a metaverse years ago, would not be achievable without the tools we have right now because of the volume of work and volume of effort behind creating all that content. So by removing that barrier with generative AI, we actually have a possibility of making a lot of those things become a lot more realistic. Every website that's out there today could have spatial content developed for it on the fly by a back-end generative AI. It doesn't require a team of developers to say, what are we going to build today for spatial content? It's going to say, well, what are our customers visiting on a regular basis? Let's go on the back end and make sure that content is spun up and ready for when people want to interact with it. So we'll be seeing these aspects come online. We'll see these back end processes with generative AI build that content out, make the experiences more rich as we're getting better and better with the devices. And eventually we're going to meet at this point in the very near future where you'll pop on a device, you'll visit a website, and that spatial content will be there, ready and served just for you based on your likes or proclivities, what you visited in the past. All of that comes to bear with this technology.
Fantastic, great. Thank you so much for that. Really insightful and so much great information, so much valuable information really there to take in. Before we wrap up, do you have any closing thoughts, and what is the best place for people to learn more about not just this technology, but then Lenovo's place within it?
Yeah, so Lenovo has a very big story right now around AI for all. Obviously everything that we touch within our technology stack, around our AI-enabled PCs, down to the data center work that we do, obviously into the XR space, all of those aspects are touching into AI. So obviously we're always excited to talk to our customers about this. But really, this technology changes so quick that you really just have to stay engaged with what's going on out there. There's no singular clearinghouse for where we learn these things right now, because it's just coming from every angle. From a overall perspective, though, this is an area that we're super excited for because it absolutely changes fundamental ways that we're going to interact with the world. This is not just a new computing paradigm. This is not something that's just going to be a part of our lives. If we choose to interact with it, it will get integrated into every aspect of our daily lives before we're even fully understanding its capabilities. So there are amazing things associated with it, but there's a lot of things that we have to tiptoe ourselves into and say, what are we getting ourselves into? How are we looking at the future of this technology? And that's one of Lenovo's core roles. It's like we want to make sure that we talk to customers about how we use this responsibly, and also how we make sure that they're engaged and ahead of the curve when this technology becomes very, very ubiquitous.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Jason. That was really insightful.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time, Rory. Appreciate it.
Thank you.